everyone. Welcome to the September 30th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Bilkowski, looking ahead to a pretty exciting weekend in racing. Plenty of Breeders' Cup preps on tap on Saturday and Sunday, October 1st and 2nd, as the Breeders' Cup really is just 5 weeks away, so a lot to look forward to in the horse racing world. We've got major stakes races at Belmont at the Big A or Aqueduct, Churchill Downs. At each of those tracks, they're running preps for the Breeders' Cup Classic, the Woodward, and the Lucas Classic. But Craig and I are going to cast our eyes out west to Santa Anita, where they're beginning their fall meet. They also are running a prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic, the Awesome Again Stakes. I think all the runners in there will be happy not to see Flightline in the starting gate. But Craig, as I was looking across these major cards at the chief circuits, New York, Kentucky, and Santa Anita out in California, seems like this California sequence, at least in the late pick 5, has the most potential for a big payout. There are no real standout strong favorites in here.
I would agree. I think these are the best betting races of the big Breeders' Cup preps this weekend. So I was actually glad you picked this one. It surprised me a little bit given your obvious East Coast bias. No, just kidding. But no, I'm looking forward to digging into this one. I always enjoy seeing it.
Yeah, I'm denying you the opportunity to extol the virtues of Life is Good. I know he was a really clever pick by you in that Woodward Stakes, so we'll leave that for another time. Maybe Craig can talk about his reasoning for that on Twitter. But we're going to focus on this Santa Anita card as they are opening up their fall meet there. Races 6 through 10 are what we're going to focus on, that late pick 5 sequence. We've got 4 stakes in this sequence and 3 turf sprints, which is going to make things interesting. I think those are some of the most competitive races in this pick 5, especially the race that closes it out, that one non-stakes event, a 2-year-old maiden race that they've cruelly stuck as the last leg in this pick 5, so you kind of do have to go into it blind with regard to horses that are taking money in that spot. But Craig, we're going to begin things with some of the graded stakes events. They think they've stuck the most competitive graded stakes in this late pick 5 sequence, reserving some of the smaller fields for the first half of the card. We're going to kick things off with race 6. It is the Santa Anita Sprint Championship, grade 2 event going 6 furlongs on the main track. This, of course, being a prep for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We've got a pretty intriguing favorite in this race in the number 2 Forbidden Kingdom, a horse who had done some nice things in the first half of the season as a 3-year-old, winning the grade 2 San Felipe in gate to wire style. Obviously disappointed in the Santa Anita Derby when he was last seen, and they're coming back off the long layoff here, Craig, turning back to a sprint. Don't really have a problem with the distance for this horse, but you just kind of have to worry if he's going to be ready for his best effort after experiencing plenty of hiccups on his road back to the races.
I kind of always suspected this horse was a sprinter, even after he won the San Felipe. It was a race where he just got away from everybody. It was early in the 3-year-old season. So I kind of think this is his best distance. As for the layoff, I agree. It's probably going to be pretty tough in here, but if he was going to come back against any field, I'm not sure he could have found an easier one in a grade 2 stakes race, because I don't know where all the sprinters went that we were seeing this summer at Del Mar in California. They didn't show up for this race, so I personally think he's going to be really tough to beat in here.
Yeah, it's been a tough summer for Forbidden Kingdom. Our colleague Brad Free wrote an article that you can access right in the Daily Racing Form Formulator PPs about the road back to the races for Forbidden Kingdom. He had a bout of colic, was recently battling a foot bruise, but Richard Mandela says he has him pretty sharp for this turn back to sprinting. I've watched some of his recent workouts, and I've got to be honest, they're not that impressive. He has never been the most flashy workhorse in the world. He doesn't often finish off his works that well, which I guess is not surprising given his running style. But his workout 3 back was, to me, kind of a negative. Really had to be asked, as he was just kind of slowing down to a walk coming down to the wire. Reportedly, he was battling a foot bruise coming out of that workout, has done better since then. I just think there are a lot of questions surrounding this horse, Craig, and he's supposed to take some early pressure because there is speed to the outside, particularly in the form of the number 6, Kid Corleone, who I think is pretty interesting in this race as the fellow 3-year-old in this field. He ran a huge speed figure 2 back off the layoff against Allowance Company, and while I'm not the biggest proponent of the bounce theory, Craig, maybe he just reacted a little bit to that big effort off the layoff when he came back last time.
It's possible. I'll also say that's a race I reviewed, and The speed figure is definitely shaky, if you ask me. And I'm the well, I didn't make this one personally, but when I reviewed it, it makes total sense on the day. But nearly every horse coming out of that race has regressed, so I'm pretty torn on him. I mean, he still ran I guess, an okay race last time in that Del Mar allowance when he was 6-5, but he really didn't have any excuse. The one excuse would be he just went too slow. He kept everybody in the race and the closers were able to run him down. So I'm kind of torn on him as well. The horse I'm interested in a little bit more is Toto Fino, who's drawn to the outside. We saw him first time in North America. His speed figure wasn't all that great. He got a 113, but as I mentioned earlier, this isn't the strongest field. And something you don't see very often is the three horses out of that race have run back have all come back to win. Now their speed figures didn't take any big jumps or anything like that, so it's not like I think I got the speed figure wrong, but it was a decent race. I mean, I think he is one that could move forward in his second start in this country, and I actually prefer him to the six a little bit. I'm a little torn on who'd be my top pick between him and Forbidden Kingdom. Probably Toto Fino because of value, but other than the three we've talked about, for me, it would be a really stretch to use anyone else in here.
Yeah, I agree with you about Toto Fino. I think he's an interesting horse off that U.S. debut last time. He was pretty game to win that race. That was going 7 furlongs off the layoff. If anything, he seems like a horse that's supposed to appreciate the turn back to 6, given the distances that he'd run in his prior starts in his native Chile. So I think he's pretty interesting. I like the outside post for him, especially with speed drawn to his inside. So I do think that both he and Kid Corleone are interesting options in this race if they're anything like their morning line prices. It's not that I think Forbidden Kingdom can't win this race. In some ways, maybe he is the most likely winner. It's just horses like this that have big reputations in California. To me, watching these races over the years, they tend to get overbet. And given that there's no obvious rival for him in this race, I think he is going to take a lot of money in here. And if he does go off at a very short price, I would be looking to fade him a little bit, instead upgrading the 6 and 7. Craig, I think you agree with me. The horse that I don't want at all is the number 1 CZ Rocket. He's shown as the second choice on the morning line, and I just haven't seen anything out of him in the past year that would make me want to back him in a spot like this.
No, and you got to forgive him. I mean, he's an 8 year old. He's I'm sure he lost a step. In horse years, I'm probably an 8 year old. I don't know, and I certainly don't have the speed I once did. He had a decent win in his allowance race when he came back at Del Mar, but he jumped into that Pat O'Brien and was near the back of the pack pretty much the whole way around, and he basically ran the same speed figure, which just shows me he hasn't been good in a while really since his races at Oaklawn at the beginning of last year, his 7 year old year. So he's one that's definitely lost a few steps. If he's the second choice, I would definitely play some vertical bets in here.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how the bettors approach this Santa Anita Sprint Championship, whether they go for the back class with the inside drawn runners or the recency with the outside drawn runners. I'm going with the latter. Let's move on to race 7, one of those 3 turf sprints that's part of this pick 5 sequence. It is the grade 2 Eddie D stakes going 6.5 down the hill at Santa Anita. Always an interesting kind of race to handicap as these runners come down from that hill chute. Craig, we've got a pretty intriguing field here. I wouldn't say that there are any standouts on paper, though I suppose the number 4 Gregorian Chant is the one to beat just based on his recent class lines. He contested that grade 1 Jaipur earlier in the year behind Casa Creed. Kind of got a wide trip that day after breaking from post 13. The mile that he tried last time at Del Mar, probably not the ideal distance for him. It's possible that he's just getting back into the right kind of spot, but I don't think he's the kind of favorite that has to win this race.
No, he's not a standout by any means. As a speed figure maker, I'm just excited that for the first time in a long time, there's 2 of these races on the same card, at least that I remember. So that makes it a little bit easier for us. But I think this is a pretty wide open race. And I don't particularly care for Gregorian Chant in here very much. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he won, but it's not like he ever runs big speed figures. He always just kind of runs in the teens. So I'm really interested in a couple others in here, and namely the one I'm most interested in is Air Force Red in the 2 hole. He's a horse who has just done most of his best running sprinting. He's 3 for 3 down the hill. He's a horse who tried the Del Mar Mile last time and actually opened up a crazy 4 length lead with just a furlong to go before getting run down by Hong Kong Henry and a couple others as well. But the pace was fast that day. I think it's just a distance that's too far for him. And this just seems like a perfect spot for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, when I was first looking through this race, that record going down the hill did kind of stick out to me on Air Force Red. I will say, if he was not coming off that 122 speed figure last time that he got when he, was chasing that extremely fast pace going the mile, I'm not sure that I would love him off his prior sprint efforts when I actually go back and look at them, because he was gifted some very soft trips, setting slow paces in races that basically just turned into sprints over the final quarter mile. And I wasn't even sure he was best the last time that he ran down the hill, because the runner-up Irideo made a good run at him up the inside trying to close. Yeah, his turf sprints to me are just okay, even though he's got that 3-for-3 record. And Craig, I was actually a little more interested in the horse right to his outside, Goliad, who was actually the one that ran off in the middle portion of that Del Mar mile to set that crazy fast half mile and 6 furlong fraction before they both completely collapsed at the end of the race. Now, I know that Air Force Red has the better prior sprint races than Goliad, but what I will say about Goliad, Craig, is that maybe we hadn't seen the best of him in his prior sprint performances, because both times that they tried to turn him back to 6 furlongs, he was coming off year-plus layoffs on each of those occasions, or I should say an 11-month layoff last time and basically a year-and-a-half layoff the prior time. So it's possible that they had just never really focused on sprint races before. Maybe they were just using sprint races as tune-ups to go longer in the past. But based on the way that he runs, if they actually, are intending to make him a competitor in a turf sprint for the first time in his career, maybe he's actually better suited to it than you might have thought in the past.
Yeah, before I get to him, let me just touch on Air Force Red. I totally agree with you about the sprints. It's the last speed figure which kind of sticks out to me. And I think it's legit. I mean, he is still just a 4 year old. He's pretty lightly raced, so should be getting better. And that is the main reason more than those 3 sprint races. I mean, I'm glad he won them. That just strengthens the case. But I agree, all 3 were with slow paces where he was able to run. But we at least know he likes the course. As for Goliad, he's the other A I'm going to be using in this race. I totally agree with you. He runs like a sprinter. He hasn't had a great chance, as you said, coming off long layoffs. But if you watch his 2 replays, it's not like he ran bad in those sprint races. I thought he ran fine and he improved off of them for a trainer who is okay off of layoffs, but he tends to let his horses get better with time. So I've got no problem with Goliad either. The other horse that I would use a little bit in here is yet another horse coming out of the Del Mar Mile, and that is Tango 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 on the outside. He's a horse who hasn't really sprinted at all, and actually he wasn't coming out of the Del Mar Mile. He's coming out of the Del Mar Handicap at a mile and 3/8. But he's a horse who has speed figures that fit in here. The turn back should be decent, and if things get hot up front, which I think is possible, even though it doesn't show that on the pace projector, you don't often get races that are stolen on the front end. I think he's going to be coming late, and he's maybe been going a little too far those last couple times in the Eddie Reed. And even though he won an allowance race at a mile and a quarter, it was against a much weaker field. I think this distance might be okay for him from that outside draw.
Yeah, I gave a look to Tango, Tango, Tango. He's a horse that I've liked a little bit in the past. I really have never gotten any inclination that he's a sprinter. Maybe if this pace really comes apart, he'd have a chance. And like you said, he does have the speed figures to compete. These are connections that like to take a shot. Sometimes it works out at a big price, but they don't have a very high success rate with these horses. So we'll see. If he does drift up quite a bit off that 8-1 morning line, I could be enticed to use him, because he seems like a horse that could potentially get a little bit ignored in this race. There are a few others that I want to talk about, Craig. The number 1 Lane Way seems like a horse that could take some money in here. He's had some minor trips in his last couple of starts since coming off the layoff. Had a bit of trouble at the start 2 back. Then last time was just a little bit keen, racing towards the back of the pack. Had to wait to make his run down along the inside behind Lieutenant Dan, who is not in this race but would be a big favorite if he were running in here. He was pretty impressive when he tried the 6 furlongs at Santa Anita, going all the way back to October of last year. So maybe the extra distance is going to benefit him a little bit.
Yeah, my only issue with him is where's his really fast races because I don't see him on our speed figures at least. He topped his fastest race last time came with a 114. Maybe he's going to get better, stretching out a little bit. That was just 5 furlongs behind Lieutenant Dan. Who, side note, like you, I was wondering where he was, so I looked him up, and I guess something's went wrong with him because he hasn't worked out in like a month. So I imagine he's off the Breeders' Cup trail. Maybe there's still time. I don't know.
I think he's reportedly training up to the Breeders' Cup, and that was decided after the last race. So maybe.
Right, but he had no workout, so I was wondering, like, in at least since the last race, he hasn't worked out, so that can't be a very good sign. Um, who knows? We'll see. But as for Laneway, yeah, I'm kind of lukewarm on him just because several others have run faster in here, and he's only the second choice on the morning line, and that's not the kind of value I'm looking for on a horse that needs to improve.
Craig, a horse that interests me quite a bit in this race, who I might lean towards making my top pick if I were making picks in this race, is the number 8, Dubai Key. He is yet another speed, but he's drawn outside of all of the other pace horses, which I generally like going down the hill in these 6.5 furlong races. And I find little to fault about his form. I know that he was beaten by Lane Way and Coulthard last time, but he was setting an honest pace that day. It was when they were both all run down by Lieutenant Dan. I thought he was very game to win his prior start when he was forced to go pretty quickly on the front end and held on. And he's a horse that has only gone 5 furlongs since coming to the United States, but it's kind of interesting if you go back and look at his form from Chile. He was going much longer distances than that, was actually a specialist in route races. So I'm not that concerned about the stretch out to 6.5. I actually, based on the way he stays on in his races, kind of like it for him compared to some others towards his inside that are speeds that I also question their stamina. So Dubai Key, he's running just as fast as others in this field that are going to be much shorter prices. So I can easily make a strong case for him.
The outside post is definitely a positive. Yeah, I've done a lot of post position stats on the downhill course because of the unique nature of it. And the inside, it can be tough from in there. The ROI, the win percentages definitely shrink. So that helps. My problem with him is I don't like how he's running his two North American races. If those were his only two races, I would absolutely hate him because these are the kind of horses I never want to bet going down the hill outside of a horse like Lieutenant Dan, who was able to handle 5 and run down the hill. It doesn't happen very often. So I'd need a little bit more than that 6-1 to be interested in him.
Let's move on to the next race in this pick 5 sequence. It is the feature race on this Saturday card, the Grade 1 Awesome Again, going 1.125 miles on the main track. A prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic, though I think everybody running in this race would be an outsider if they made it into there, because, Craig, I think the most interesting discussion point coming into this Awesome Again is how are these horses that were beaten 19 and 25 lengths by Flightline going to fare as they come back without him in the field?
You know, it's an interesting point. I almost wonder if Country Grammar even knows Flightline was in the race. You know, it was almost like a separate race from Flightline in that he was just so far ahead of everyone else. And it's not like Royal Ship didn't challenge Country Grammar for second. He actually made a nice move to get right up, looked like he was going to go by. And that one really dug in for second. I know I talked about it on the Pacecast. It seemed like he thought he was in a race there with that one and not Flightline. So it's an interesting case. This is a race. I think it's a little bit. I mean, who knows? I guess the classic, the only two real contenders most people would say right now are Flightline and Life is Good. These guys fit with everybody else after that speed figure wise, Country Grammar and Royal Ship. So I don't want to slight them too much. Um, of the two, I don't know which way I'd lean. The cutback in distance probably favors Royal Ship a little bit, but Country Grammar is third off the layoff, moving in the right direction. If I had to pick one, I guess I'd go with Country Grammar. The Royal Ship's going to offer more value. For me, it was hard to find any other horses. I guess the only one I could really make a case for was Express Train, a horse who we hadn't seen since April. He had tailed off a little bit after winning the Big Cap, winning the San Pascal. Um, Second in the Californian. Didn't do a whole lot of running after a tough start in the Pacific Classic, but he could rebound. He's shown in the past he's as good as the other two, or at least close to it. So I don't want to totally dismiss him. Beyond that, I couldn't come up with anyone else.
Yeah, we're pretty much in agreement here, Craig. I had trouble getting past the favorites in this race as well, and this would be the one leg in the sequence where I would just chalk out and, primarily lean on those first two horses that you were mentioning, Royal Ship and Country Grammar. I've always been a little bit more of a Royal Ship fan, and like you said, the turn back to a mile and an eighth probably favors him slightly. So maybe I upgrade him just a little bit in my wagers, but they're the two that I would have most of my play going through. And the only other horse, like you said, that you can really make a case for is the number 7 Express Train. I do wonder if he's the one of those three that's moving in the wrong direction a little bit, where maybe Royal Ship and Country Grammar are just kind of reaching the better part of their campaigns. It seemed like Express Train had so much of that success early in the year, and he didn't really finish last time. I didn't love the visual of one of his workouts since then, so I'm a little bit down on him, though he'd obviously be no shock in this race. Express Train has the back races. There's nobody else in here that I can really get too excited about. There was a time when Tripoli could have been competitive in a spot like this. I feel like those days are long since past. Bob Baffert has a couple of other runners in here, but it just feels like maybe they're signed on to create some pace for Country Grammar, because I don't really see them as being major factors. Defunded was second in a very, very weak edition of the Gold Cup earlier in the year. So for me, it's just the two favorites, Royal Ship and Country Grammar. Now, what I'll be most interested to see coming out of it awesome again is what kind of speed figures these horses run, because I know there's some feeling out there that maybe nobody else showed up in that Pacific Classic behind Flightline, and some people were a little skeptical that horses like Country Grammar and Royal Ship got their typical speed figures, losing by the gargantuan margins that they did. So it'll be a little interesting to see how they come out of that race and what kind of numbers they run without that formidable presence in the field.
That's the thing I'm most interested in, to be honest. And I was very relieved when I scanned the PPs and saw that there was at least one other dirt route on the card. So it's only at a mile and a 16th, but I'd rather that than the flat mile. So it's a much better comparison and should help. Usually the track is really consistent at Santa Anita. So those two should be easy to compare.
Let's move on to what I think is the most difficult portion of this sequence, the final two legs. Both of these are turf sprints. The final stakes race on the card is the penultimate leg of the pick 5. That's race 9, the Unzip Me Stakes for 3-year-old fillies, going 6.5 furlongs, again on the downhill course at Santa Anita. Craig, the number 5, Connie Swingle, listed at 3-1 in the morning line, one that I could see getting bet down even further off that, just given the fact that she's coming in with that appealing record, 2 for 2 at the distance, 3 for 3 on the turf. She's run speed figures that do make her the horse to beat in here, but I think as I took a deeper look into this race, there were enough things going on that I wouldn't want to just concede the race to Connie Swingle.
No, there's some others in here who certainly can compete with her. We gave the race a 108 race rating, and there's horses who have run just as fast as she has. Brandon's my lawyer on the inside ran a 109, going 5 furlongs last time, but he did win running down the hill to begin his year in back in May with a 103. And as 3-year-olds, I mean, you would expect some progression, so he fits. The two horse Del Mona ran 107 and 104 the last time back on the East Coast, ships out west. So I'm a little interested in that one just as a new shooter. They seem to, the horses seem to be able to compete as we would expect when they move from the east to the west. So I think this race is actually pretty open.
I would agree with that. I think that there are quite a few runners to consider in here. One that I will not be considering, who could take some money in this race, is the number 7, Grace Adler, who's trying the turf for the first time. I know that she's got some back class, having been a Grade 1 winner on the dirt as a 2-year-old, but Craig, to me, this just seems like a total desperation move. She's disappointed a little bit, and Bob Baffert's just saying, well, why not give her a shot on the turf? Sometimes the progeny of Curlin do handle it, but there's not much turf pedigree here. And if you look up Bob Baffert's stats, they're pretty negative with horses trying the turf.
Right. Yeah, we're on the same page. There's no chance Grace Agler will be on any of my tickets. I when I looked up Bob Baffert's turf stats, they were actually a little bit better than I thought they would be, but they're still not good, especially when you compare them to his dirt. She's a horse who was decent on dirt to begin her career, won the Del Mar debutante, hasn't really done a thing since. And I agree, it seems like more of a desperation move to me. I talked about a couple horses that I think could run with Connie Swingle. I'll start with a long shot that it really has me intrigued in here, and that's on the towards the outside, the 8 horse Tesaray. She's 12-1 on the morning line, and I think she's going to be every bit of that. And she is the kind of horse that I usually really like on the hill. She's a horse who has drawn outside, as I talked about before. She has done well at a mile. She won both her starts as a 2 year old at that distance. She's third off the layoff. She's been a little bit of a disappointment. She didn't do a lot of running in her return, but I thought that race, the Del Mar Oaks, is actually better than it looks. That Spenderella, who just towered over that field that day, winning by 4.5 lengths, was just much, much better than the rest. And her losing by only 6 at a mile and an eighth, a distance what might be a little too far. I just really love the turn back in here. I love the post, and she's one that I want to use prominently.
Yeah, I gave her a long look. I have a similar horse in here that is also a turn back that I like at, I think, the same price are in the morning line. That's the number 4, Countess Rosina. She actually does have some experience going down the hill before, and I think that race back in May where she finished behind Connie Swingle is worth watching because there wasn't that much pace on in the race. Connie Swingle was just kind of sharing the lead through pretty moderate early fractions, and there was some trouble that a few horses got in at the top of the stretch when Connie Swingle was able to scoot away from the field, and a few others were just basically cost any chance as horses were kind of veering out across the dirt crossing. Countess Rosina had already gotten shuffled back behind all that trouble, and she was just totally out of position at that point in the race. I actually thought she finished really well to be second, given the pace scenario of that race, and to me, the margin between her and Connie Swingle is not as great as the finishing position in that race would suggest. And since then, they tried to go longer with her. Watching those races, she just looks to me like one that didn't really want to go that far, even though she won against a weaker field two back. And I really like this turn back for her, especially if there's some pace in this race. I expect her to be running late at what should be a fair price.
I've got no problem with her. I'm glad I didn't bring up both of my long shots and steal your thunder there. She is definitely the other one. I love the turn back as well. And this is a race where I just want to spread. Somebody I don't want to spread with are the couple horses on the outside. Briefcase Girl and Island of Love. I think they're a little bit lower, but they're both 5-1 on the morning line. So I wanted to mention them, but they just seem a little light in the speed figure department compared to some others. Um, Not sure who was the other one I liked in here. I'm asking you like you would know. Oh, the 3 horse Lexington Humor. She's a horse who I think she had a little experience. She raced against Connie Swingle in that race. For me, she just seems to be improving. I don't want to knock her off of that race too much. She won at 5 furlongs last time, but I didn't hate her race at 6.5. So at a big price, she's another one I want to use as well.
Yeah, Craig, this is the kind of race where at the end of the day, the only horse that would really surprise me winning is Grace Adler. I just don't get her in this spot. I think you could make a case for all of the other 9 horses in this field. I mean, nobody is just some kind of total outsider that they seem impossible on paper. I agree, you probably want to do some price shopping. I also was not super interested in those horses drawn to the outside, though I probably would get a little bit intrigued if a horse like Briefcase Girl drifted up a little bit in price. 5-1 seems short on her, but her maiden win two back was very impressive, and she seems like much more of a natural turf sprinter, so I like the turn back for her. It's just a big step up in class, and 5-1 doesn't really seem like a fair price on her. You had earlier mentioned the 2 horses drawn down towards the rail, Brandon's My Lawyer and Delmona, and I think that they both make a lot of sense in this race. I mean, I didn't talk about them previously, but I could get interested in them at the right kind of prices. Probably not the ideal post position for Brandon's My Lawyer with speed drawn to the outside, but Craig, Delmona, that race that she's coming out of, maybe she just improved in the Jamie Begg barn and in New York, but the field that she faced last time at Saratoga, Poppy Flower, Empress Tigress, I think they're on par, if not better than the field that she's facing here. So if she's just improved overall, I think she's a horse that is going to be very tough in this race. And 8-1 seems fair on her, or 6-1, I should say.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I mentioned those two. I'm going to use them both. This is, if I haven't been clear on this, this is definitely a race spreading for me. Hopefully, Connie Swingle gets bet heavily because I'm going to play many options against her. I'm not even sure if I'll have her. This is a sequence, I should say, where I'm going to have to use multiple tickets for sure. I'm not going to leave Connie Swingle out on some of them, but it's one where I'm going to have to structure that she's not on it with a lot of other favorites.
Well, let's move on to the final leg of this sequence. As I said, the racing office at Santa Anita has cruelly put this 2-year-old maiden race as the last leg of the pick five, so we kind of do have to go in a little bit blind with some first time starters in the field. Craig, what I will say is this is another spread race for me, and we've got two to close out this sequence, so you do have to be a little bit selective, getting the right prices in the mix for you. And I think you can make a case for plenty of horses that are going to get dismissed on the tote board here, because the horse that is shown as the morning line favorite, the number 9, Candy Caramel, she's one that I really don't need any part of. She ran okay in her turf sprint, but I feel like there are others that have a lot more upside than she does.
Yeah, she hasn't run much speed figures. I was going to say if we brought you this far, you're on your own for the 10th, because it's one where I spent way too much time in Formulator trying to find some clever stats with all the first time starters, second time starters, first time starters. All I found was negatives. There's very few positive trainer stats. Maybe you came up with one and you can let us know, but uh, my conclusion at the end was I sure hope the AE draws in because I actually kind of like that one. Canthera, John Sheriff's is 2 for 5 with second time start or 2 for 7 second time starters, turf to dirt, but I couldn't come up with a whole lot else. But I'm also with you in that I just don't see it with Candy Caramel. What's so great about her? There's a horse who has run on the turf at just 5 furlongs, and Mima Mita, who's in the 2 hole, who ran a little bit faster than her. Looks like she might appreciate the 6. So, of the runner, and gets a trainer upgrade as well, I would prefer her of the horses that have run.
Yeah, I agree. I don't need any part of Candy Caramel. Mia Mamita is a horse that I suppose I could use, but she just ran okay in her one turf race. If nobody else can really run in this field, I guess she's got a chance. I thought equally interesting out of that race was the number 7, the Dance Between. Not that she did a ton of running, but she looked a little bit green that day, was off slowly, had to come through a bit of traffic. She puts blinkers on for her second start, so I thought that she could do better for Phil D'Amato as she comes back off that debut experience. Other horses with experience, Craig, are trying the turf for the first time. The number 4, Broadway Girls, and the number 12, Good Is Gone, they both come out of the same race, finishing behind that Bob Baffert trainee Home Cooking, who just barely lost the Del Mar debutante in her next start. And I thought both of these horses were ones that could potentially handle the turf at better prices. Not that there's a ton of damn side pedigree on either one, but Army Mule has had some success as a turf sire. He's the sire of Broadway Girls. Doug O'Neill can certainly get a horse to win switching to the turf. And the horse on the outside, Good Is Gone, who is, I think, 30-1 in the morning line. This is a horse that's a half to a runner that was a turf winner. The Dam was best on synthetic, handled the turf. Nyquist can get turf runners. So I think that one's a bit interesting too at what's going to be a huge price.
The Dance Between would probably be my first pick in here, the one you mentioned first. D'Amato does fine with second time starters, wins at 18% with an ROI just below 2. You're never going to get a great ROI with him just because he's so popular. So I've got no problem with that horse. The two horses you mentioned are a bit of the conundrum that I was talking about when I dug through the formulator. Broadway Girls, Doug O'Neill with second time starters, 2 year olds going dirt to turf is 1 for 14. Good is gone. Trainer Steve Knapp is 4 for 88, first time on turf. So, but if they're going to win races, it would be one like this, where to me it's just wide open. So maybe it is a race where you want to lean on the pedigree more than the trainer stats. I did want to ask you, I don't know how many of these workouts for horses like this make it to XBTV, but if anybody caught your eye looking at that route.
I did watch some workouts for this race. That's what I was doing before I was a little bit late sending you the link to record today. There are two horses that I think are worth discussing from a first-time starter standpoint. The one that I think could take some money is the number 5, Ms. Defy Doll, going out for Richard Mandela. She's looked okay in her workouts, obviously cost a lot of money at the 2-year-old sale, going for $350,000. One of her workouts late at Del Mar was in company with Canderel, who I think is a stakes-winning older turf sprinter for Richard Mandela, and she basically held her own with that one. Had to be asked a little bit to stay with him at the end of the workout, but I thought showed some ability on the dirt. But she feels like one that could take a little bit of money in this race, maybe rightfully so, because I don't think you have to be that good to beat the horses that have run in this field. The other horse that I think is going to be a bigger price that I'd interested in as a first-time starter is the number 3, Poetica. I don't know if she's going to be 20 to 1. It seems kind of hard for me to believe that she could be a bigger price than the other Peter Urton first-time starter that's drawn towards the outside. Just given the fact that she was a $425,000 yearling purchase by Speightstown. There is pedigree here. It's not so much immediate pedigree, but the second dam was a turf synthetic specialist. So it's definitely more of a turf synthy sprinting family. And I've seen a couple of her workouts. I don't know what kind of company she's keeping in the morning, but she's looked best in both of the workouts that I saw. She's got a really nice fluid stride to her, and it just seems like a horse that has some ability. The negative is that Peter Urton, with first-time starters on the turf, is 2 for 42, and I think 1 for 25 in turf sprints over the past 5 years. So not the kind of horses that he typically wins with, but I just think the number 3 can run a little bit, and she could be dismissed at a decent price in this race. So we've mentioned a lot of horses, Craig. If I had to kind of narrow it down for myself as the ones that I'm most interested in, it would be the number 3, Poetica, the number 4, Broadway Girls, and that AE that you mentioned, the number 13, Cantara. If she gets into the race, she's obviously very interesting because she was green on debut and she has turf pedigree.
Right. As for Poetica, it's funny the stat you mentioned. It just kind of shows that you can come up, there's so many different ways you can go. I looked up Peter Urton and I narrowed it down to 2-year-old first time turf sprints, and he was 1 for 13. So I decided to look at the one, and he actually has lost his last 12. The first one of the 13 was the one that he won, but it was in 2017, but it was at a very big price. So I didn't want to totally dismiss that one, and kind of made a note of it. So I like that you like the workouts. Just for me, this is a really tough race, and one I'll be spreading, as I mentioned.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to go in this finale at Santa Anita. Well, that's the end of the Pick 5 sequence, Craig. We've covered a lot of ground. Let's briefly go back and just kind of review how we could put these tickets together. I think we're going to have a similar strategy in where we go thin as opposed to spreading. Races like the Santa Anita Sprint Championship and the Awesome Again seem like the places where you can narrow things down a little bit.
Right. And what I'm going to do is make sure I don't play tickets with more than 2, maybe 3 favorites if one of them's kind of lukewarm. Anything beyond that. So I would definitely play multiple tickets. I would go thin in the first leg. I would use Forbidden Kingdom. I suspect that he's going to come out okay. I thought he was a sprinter all along, but I'm also going to use Toto Fino in equal parts because I think he's got just as good a shot as Forbidden. If Forbidden Kingdom doesn't run his race, I think he's the most likely winner. In the Eddie D, I'm going to lean on Air Force Red and Goliad. I think both of them turning back look good. I'll also use Tango, Tango, Tango. Maybe a couple others in here, but they would be the 3 main ones for me. In the Awesome Again, I will mostly stick with Royal Ship and Country Grammar, maybe just a little bit of Express Train. Definitely no one else in that one. And then the last 2 are going to be spread races. I have some top picks that have pretty big prices, but you can go back and listen to all the others because there's a bunch of them. But my top pick would be Tesaray in the 9th. And in the 10th, it would be the 7 horse to dance between, unless the 13 draws in.
Yeah, we're pretty similar in terms of structure in this sequence, just going a few different places and maybe the spread races. In the first leg, I am a little bit against Forbidden Kingdom. Depending on how thick I have to go later, I could fade him to a greater extent, but I am interested in Kid Corleone and Totofino towards the outside. In the Eddie D, well, I would use Gregorian Chant as maybe a B kind of horse. I think he can obviously win the race. I'm more interested in value on others, particularly the number 3 Goliad and the number 8 Dubai Key. The latter probably I prefer a little bit. We'll see how they bet this race. I could also use a little bit of Lane Way, but I'm concerned that he could take some money in that spot. In the 8th race, the Awesome Again, Craig and I are very similar here. We both want to lean on Royal Ship and Country Grammar. In the Unzip Me, race 9, my long shot is the number 4 Countess Rosina. I would also use the number 2 Delmona and the number 5 Connie Swingle. Obviously, she is the favorite on the horse to beat. But like Craig was saying, you could spread with others in this race if you're right in some of the other legs. There are other price horses that I could certainly use, like the number 1 Brandon's My Lawyer, the outside horse, the number 10 Briefcase Girl, even Craig's long shot Tezzeret. Definitely a spot where I want to have some coverage. And then the last leg, I think you just kind of have to cross your fingers a little bit and hope you're using the right horses. I want to base the horses I'm using primarily on what I think could be value. The first time starters, the number 3 Poetica, who I do think will be a price, the number 5 Mystified Doll, among those with experience. Obviously, the 13 Major Player if she draws in, but even if she doesn't, I want to use horses like the number 4 Broadway Girls. I could use the number 7 Dance Between, and even at a huge price, that 12 horse that I mentioned, Good Is Gone. So as many as my ticket budget can allow in the final leg of this Pick 5 sequence at Santa Anita. Craig, hopefully we gave out some good opinions. This is definitely a sequence where I could see it paying quite well if you beat a few of these favorites in the final few legs.
Right, and I think we both agree. The one favorite I'm not going to use at all is in that last leg. It was the 9 horse Candy Caramel.
Yes.
I don't want any parts of that one, so that will help in restricting my tickets and trying to get it down to 2 and max 3 favorites on them, because that's one that's definitely out for me.
Well, that's a look at the late pick 5 sequence at Santa Anita on Saturday. Craig and I will, of course, be back next week to recap all of these races, the stakes action, I should say, as well as the stakes taking place all around the country at Aqueduct, at Churchill Downs. A lot of Breeders' Cup preps will be taking place this weekend, so there'll be plenty for us to recap on the TimeformUS Pacecast next week. Remember that you can always catch these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Everybody, thanks for listening this week, and make sure to catch that TimeformUS Pacecast coming up next Tuesday.